Hear me well? We'll be slowly starting, and I can see that people are still joining. So first of all, in terms of organization, if you want to ask any questions, feel free to use the chat section. Just after a short presentation, I'll save some time to answer the questions. Yeah, so feel free to use it. Okay. As you know, today's topic is how to generate customers with outbound and how to make it work. Oh, just a second. Probably muting the stream on LinkedIn is helpful when you stream on two platforms. So you should not hear the double voice right now. At least I hope so. Okay. So let's start rolling. How to make outbound work in 2026. And the first thing, I think it's kind of fair to say why I feel anyhow entitled to be here and to share with you what I know about outbound. So, hi, my name is Margaret, and when you look at it from perspective of time, I spent almost like 1/3 of my life doing something related to getting customers through outbound. I started at Woodpecker as a junior support/success specialist. And right now I'm CEO, and I'm super enthusiastic about building, B2B sales pipelines through actually chasing after your customers or potential customers with outreach. Today, I'll try to tell you a bit more how you can combine email and LinkedIn and build your pipeline actually in a way that is sustainable and can help you over time to keep it as a working system. Okay, so let's start with this. And the first thing first is, I believe, an honest question to ask. Is it even possible to get some customers right now with outbound? I know that some people were doubting, like cold email is dead or overall getting customers proactively is dead. I think with every channel, the logic is the same. If you know how to use the channel, you'll be able to generate pipeline through it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's very important to start with understanding what the lead means when you do cold outreach or when you proactively try to get the customer. Because cold outbound is one of the very limited types of acquisition channels that actually allows you to select on personal level, so on one-to-one level, to whom you want to reach out to. And the response that you get is unlike in terms of paid ads or anything that broadcasts one-to-many, a direct response to your value proposition saying, hey, I'm interested, let's talk. And why I'm saying it? Because using outbound as a channel to generate constant lead flow is one type of approach you can take. The other one potentially is when you try to, in a short period of time, test something. Test your value proposition, test the language that you use, see if your targeted audience reacts to something better than to the other stuff, or maybe check if particular market is worth going after. So, when you try to figure, is outbound something for me? You should not only focus on the fact like, okay, so I will build a pipeline, I'll keep it the way it is for like a year or so. Sometimes it's also worth to consider it as a short-term investment just to validate if something is worth spending more time on. So when you think about lead from a perspective of outreach, think about someone directly saying on one-to-one level, hey, I'm interested, let's talk. So to prove or to show you what type of results you may expect, I selected a few campaigns from our customers just to show you, what type of results you may expect and from what markets. So first, as an example, US market, which tends to be pretty saturated, yet the customer was able to generate over 1K leads from over 1K contacted people just in this one campaign, 27% response rate. Next example is from a niche that is not exactly typical choice for cold outreach, namely for education. So here, 457 leads generated from 5K database, 43% response rate. Again, in a market that I would say is more into direction of cold calling than cold emailing, yet performance is, if you ask me, pretty well. And the most shiny example that I was also writing about on my post promoting this class is super targeted campaign with micro segmentation 46 people engaged in the campaign, and almost everyone replied. 27 leads, 95.5% response rate, which was, by the way, not an accident. That was kind of something that was repetitive in terms of process, because this customer gained like 7 or 8 campaigns on a similar performance level. This campaign, or this set of campaigns, was in particular about building partnerships, like brand partnerships, both paid and free. So of course it's favorable niche, but yet still, I think you'll agree that the result is pretty impressive. We'll also talk about like global benchmarks and the Dianas for like the whole markets, just to give you also the concept of more realistic or more statistically speaking correct results that you may expect when you do outbound. Okay, so I'll try to summarize or squeeze 9 years of experience, or 9+ years of experience I have, and this, I hope, short and feasible presentation. So the very important thing is to put an order on what you do and how you plan, regardless of a channel. Some pieces of this presentation are actually evergreen, so regardless of a channel you use, you can apply this framework or this know-how. So first thing, or one of the elements, not necessarily the first thing, is what you communicate. So, the offer, the language, why me, why now. We'll have a separate slide when I will do a deep dive on, how to make some sense out of all terms that are around this. The next one is to whom you're communicating. So your niche, your TAM, the context. Of course, if you're using signals, that would be also like, the time relevancy for that particular context that you are getting for your campaign. And inseparable element of any outbound campaign, so technology. So, tech details, how you build it, what type of tech setup you use, how you plan it, what you do if something goes sideways, and so on and so forth. Very important thing, you build in that direction. So you start with technology. Why? Because if your LinkedIn account is getting blocked, if your emails are landing in spam, there is it doesn't matter what you do in terms of communication, segmentation, niche, whatever, your messages will be just going into the void. So you always start with technology to create something that is sustainable, because if you're not building it from building blocks from a big one to a small one, you kind of get the sense of what is on the image on the right side. So you're building something that is pretty unstable. And opposite to that, we want to build something that is pretty stable and can sustain for a longer period of time. Important side note, it requires iterations. So when I think about my first campaign, or my first copy, which is even worse, it's not a masterpiece. You'll go through iterations, you will adjust, you will find what works. And through this, you'll actually end up in a situation that you build a system that works for you. So be brave enough, or be curious enough, or just remember to try more than one time before you decide, okay, it's not working. Because sometimes just a small tweaks may give you better results or better perspective on what to fix or adjust. Okay, so as promised, technology, so your foundation, and we are starting with email. If I would have to do a shortcut on how the deliverability history looks like, or how it has changed, the shortcut would be, it was easy, now it's hard. With all seriousness, we all remember, or some of you may remember, the times when we were sending 200, 500 emails from same email account to one domain. Everything was just perfect. Unfortunately, it's not the case anymore. So the first thing, which is probably obvious to some of you, but I want to vocalize it and say it just to, highlight how much it has changed, is that right now we scale horizontally. It's also important to have it in mind when you think where you could or should use email, so channel that is easy to scale horizontally, versus LinkedIn, which is more limited in terms of how you scale it up, because, email accounts versus LinkedIn accounts, and ease or difficulty to actually set it up in a way that allows you to sustain it for time. Okay, so what I mean by saying horizontal scaling. If you want to send more, you don't scale through just adding more quota to your email. You set up multiple domains, and on each of domains, you set up some mailboxes and scale through adding new units. So I would say the market standard right now is to have like a bunch of domains, up to 3 email accounts set on each of these, up to 30 emails sent per day. With this disclaimer, I know many agencies or big sales teams sending less than 30 due to, for example, sensitivity of market or due to length of warm up, which would be the next section to discuss. But overall, the time when you could send like, hundreds of emails from one mailbox a day, it's not there anymore. And if you're using it still as your strategy, it's probably time to consider if your messages are not actually land in spam, if you're not being blocked yet. So probably a bit of a cliche to say, but it's there. So if you're scaling, try to scale horizontally. Good thing is that we are right now working with technology that helps us to scale domains and mailboxes in an easy way. So you can buy from, you can buy directly from like Woodpecker interface, but we have native integrations with, great partners like MailForge, Mail.co, Zapmail, Hypertide. So you can name the provider and, choose from custom SMTPs, custom ESPs versus providers as Google or Microsoft, and you can just diversify and set up your tech stack. So no excuse to send from your main domain and no excuse to send from just one domain and, a bunch of mailboxes and not scale up, because this is what will give you the volume that you need to see the conversion. One more thing, because I still see it from time to time that people try to, at the beginning, send from their main domain because they don't want to wait with warm up. Well, we can have a very long discussion about pros and cons of that. But one thing, especially for more technical layers, like, how you allow catch-alls for the domain that is dedicated for code outbound will have slightly different tech setup than the one that you use for your main business. So like, online presence and doing communication with your customers and coworkers. So I would say it's not the best choice, yet I understand the motivation that sometimes from time to time wins in this situation. So moving smoothly forward, warm up and the discussion. How long? 2 weeks, 1 week, not do at all, 3 months. I would say it all depends what type of results you expect. Statistically speaking, longer warm up is better, long story short. But with all seriousness, if you need to start sending soon, so like you have some urgency, which is often the case, the best option may be to do shorter warm up, so like 2-3 weeks, and have in the back of your head that this infrastructure most likely will need replacement or fixing process, so the recovery, after shorter time. Statistically, it's like 30 to 60 days. And of course, a lot of varieties, the quality of your copy, the quality of your segmentation, how good you are in terms of like, your offer and market fit and stuff. But overall, if you warm up shorter, you need to be prepared that having backup is extremely important at that stage. So if you want to start sending fast, get the infrastructure up there, warm up it for a shorter period of time, and then be aware that you should have another one at the stage of proper warm up, for example, for 2 to 3 months. And then when the first one gets bad, you can just switch and use the one that is better prepared. The configuration that is there, just to mention, if you do your infrastructure, you need to take care of all configuration setups, so SPF, DKIM, DMARC. Right now, if you get your infrastructure from providers that are dedicated to it, it's all fixed and done for you, so you don't have to figure it out. If you're manually sourcing your infrastructure, that's something that you should take care of before you start sending. And the benchmarks, if you track open rates, which is again the matter of discussion, but I know some customers still following the open rate tracking due to very limited time. So it's a guidance that you can get if you don't have enough data in terms of reply rate. 40% plus would be something that you're looking up for. Bounce rate, 5% below. I would say in ideal world, 2 to 3%. But if you have more than 5, that's probably the moment to stop sending and consider what is going wrong with my situation, either on deliverability, market fit, or messaging level, because that may be a bunch of things. And backup infrastructure. Do have backups, because with outbound, that's to some extent just a matter of time when something goes sideways. So better to be prepared. And if you wonder how much of what you need to actually set up the tech on a safe level, well, here is the planner. You can just scan the QR code if you want to. It will lead you to a calculator where you can say like, okay, I want to send this, what percentage of or what volume of backup I should have for what period of time, and so on and so forth. So feel free to use this resource. It's free. You don't have to log in anywhere or do anything extra. So yeah, if you want to, it's there for you. Okay, moving onwards. LinkedIn. And now with LinkedIn automation, that's the matter of choice and accepting risks. Automating LinkedIn may be risky in terms of like, not all automations, or actually I would say majority of automations in terms of LinkedIn are not very much welcome. So if you are unsecure or you don't feel comfortable with this type of risk, you may select provider that allows you to do semi-automation. So prepares everything to a layer of like, this is the copy, this is a list of prospects, and you just manually go to their profiles and send or connect them to stuff. Then it's way safer for you. But if you want to do the full automation, I prepared this slide just to give you some context of what I see, because Woodpecker allows you also to natively integrate LinkedIn in your campaign flow. So I wanted to share like things that we see among our customers as potential risks when you do full LinkedIn automation. But again, if you don't want to risk your account or you feel uncomfortable with it, you also do have options of semi-automations that can be a good solution for you. Okay, so one thing is one automation at a time. I've seen this more times than I probably would like to, that people forget they have some plugins running in the background, doing stuff on LinkedIn, scraping data, being active. If you collapse a bunch of this type of automations at once, you may create abnormal activity in an easy way, which may lead to your account being blocked. There are limits, like every tool that is out there limits you in some way, direct or indirect. So make sure that the tool that you are selecting is observing the limits of your account, either by the age, the type of account, whatever else is there. But basically, that's the logic, very similar to, email providers blocking when you send too much. The similar logic is here, because if your activity is abnormal comparing to what you usually do, that's a signal for the platform provider there's something odd going on, and probably it's not human driven. Benchmarks, as with the previous one, here we have slightly higher rates. So you have like 20 to 45 connection acceptance rate. Of course, it varies on the niche here even more than with email. And 6 to 20 reply rate, again, depending if we're looking at the DMs versus emails. But overall, the global stats, and we also run the test against like other sources that we can find that are publicly available, we are talking about similar values. The warm-up aspect, which is less formal than in terms of email, but again, if you try to observe tendency of a user to say if the user is using automation or abusing the system, the warm-up process is something to like protect you against it. So for LinkedIn, the classic warm-up would be to have like regular presence on LinkedIn. It's either just logging in, publishing, interacting, commenting, doing stuff that shows that your account is actually somehow alive and there is someone behind this. Building network, again, something that helps you to show that you're present and that it's not just a fake activity. And organic interactions. So if you haven't used your account for like 2 years and you will just plug in a massive automation and run it, there is a very high chance that you will get blocked. Also, depending on what is your strategy and the volume of traffic on your account, but also blocked accounts can happen if you do outbound, and you need to be somehow prepared that if you lose it, you rebuild from scratch. I've seen stories like this among close friends. It always sucks, but it's a part of the game if you want to focus on outbound. If you're running a company and you want to mitigate the risk, the good idea may be to divide, like if you have a people focusing on content and publishing, and these accounts are not used for outbound per se, and then you have people that are focusing mostly on outbound, and then you kind of like on board or accept the risk that if the accounts get blocked, we just start from scratch. Just a matter of strategy. And in terms of tech setup, of course, strong suggestion to paid accounts, regular cleaning of outdated invitations, because that also indicates if you're actually going in there and doing something with the account, and observing limits or having tools that observe the limits for you. Okay, so we have the text setup there. So we know what we want to send or through which channels we want to send. And now the uncomfortable question, how to choose a niche. And this is probably the moment when usually I get this like, oh my God, so much work and I need to figure and I just want to send to anyone everything and, how to categorize it. So we kind of came up with a framework that can help you to do it. Later on, I will show you the beautiful Excel file. If you're not Excel file enthusiast, probably that will be somewhere around your nightmare. But I wanted just to share with you how in practice we did it internally to just organize what we do and how we try to help our customers if they're in a situation that they need some backup thoughts. So let's dive into it. So when you want to score the niche, so answer the question to whom I should reach out to. Try to score it 1 to 5 in the following categories. And the first category is the pain. So is it like the pain that you're solving, like people are dying here pain, or maybe potentially in the next quarter, if we eventually solve it, that would be nice to have. And yeah. So if that's the latter category, probably you'll need something better to see the traction out there. If this is like existential pain that you are solving, you're in a good place. Next thing is money, as obvious as that. So if your niche is not in a place in terms of budget that can cover your costs, that's probably not something that you should chase after. The next is growth, because if you're planning long-term strategy based on this assessment, choosing the niche that is overall shrinking, unless it's like the aware choice, may not be the best idea. So if the niche is growing or shrinking is an important indication. Then size. If your time is super small, you may be willing to invest more in terms of like super direct segmentation or super narrow segmentation, invest more in terms of assets you want to put to make this campaign actually convert. And probably then doing like 3 months warm up becomes more a no brainer because you want to actually reach out to those people because your scale is smaller. Reachability, I would say nowadays is not that much of an issue because, finding data and in general, buying data becomes cheaper and cheaper. Yeah, but it's good to run a test if you can find email addresses, LinkedIn profiles, phone numbers, whatever else you want to use, if it's easy for you to source. And the last one, unique fit. It relates to the value proposition, so I'll move that part a bit further because we will dive deeper into it as well. And now it sounds cool, but from where I take the data, this is the offer of like what sources you can use here to actually get the information from the best from to the worst or the weakest. The customer interviews, always evergreen, the best. If your customers are saying you what they need, probably they're not lying. So this is a very good source of information. Then prospect interviews, network interviews, communities, and the weakest, the overall search. So, like LLMs, Google, whatever else you use. And what to collect in the process. In that process, I would suggest to collect pains, outcomes, dream or failed, language snippets, because if you talk about stuff that are relevant but in a very weird way, I don't think you'll get a lot of traction. And objections, to answer them upfront or to at least be aware what you'll get or potentially get in the process of conversation. Okay, so now about the unique value proposition. So one thing that I keep saying, and I do believe it's still important, is that finding offer market fit is existential to convert from cold outreach. If you try to sell meat to a vegan restaurant, it makes absolutely no difference how much of AI, personalization, segmentation, whatever else you'll put, A/B testing, subject line variables, signals, you'll put on the top of that, because that offer makes no sense. So you are multiplying with zero. And that will still give you, unfortunately, zero. So make sure that you understand your offer market fit on a high level before you invest in anything, because this will something that will either drown your results or drive it. And of course, it takes time. You will wander a bit through like objections, pains, different offers and language, but ultimately through testing, A/B testing, you'll find, the pain and the offer that resonates. And there's a lot of resources like, Hormozy equation, with the dreamed outcome, perceived likelihood, time delay, and so on, that explains what is this value that we want to capture. But overall, the core components are the dreamed outcome. So what they really want, what they want to achieve. And when you do the research, you can capture it, like people saying, I want to have, I don't know, better optimization in terms of my time. So for example, for me, it's the never-ending problem is that when I focus on product as a CEO, I don't have enough time to focus on sales. And then if I focus on sales, my roadmap becomes either a wish list or is just drying somewhere. So, when you find the real dream outcome that the person would like to have, just write it down in a workbook, and that's the resource you may use later on. Then the likelihood, so like why they should believe you, because right now in the majority of markets saying just like, hey, I'll bring you like 100 new customers next day or next week without saying how, it's like, like why I should believe, what is the reason for it. So likelihood is something that you should support and back up with either a mechanism or the reason or something believable. Then time delay, of course, we don't want to have time delay, so quick value. And then effort and sacrifices we will try to limit thanks to whatever we are bringing to the table. So the template, I think one of the most typical ones is like get the dreamed outcome and time delay with the mechanism backed by proof or by anything else that makes sense without the effort. Question I get a lot, is it worth sending another follow-up or where to stop following up? And I wanted to show you two examples, one which is like a good campaign and the other one which is like not necessarily performing. So in terms of poor campaign, you'll probably see something like this with mass sending. So you have the comparison of like email 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 to 12. Yes, there are people sending 12 follow-ups, believe me or not, but that's the case. And then the other one, which is good. And by good, I don't mean like top 1%. I mean like average plus. So fully achievable. And if you look at the stats, you will see that between first and the sixth email, there's like a quite big gap. So statistically speaking, sending 1 to 2 follow-ups is the one that makes sense. Then if you see no replies, just stop for 1 month and come back in 1 month with new angle, new value proposition, try to frame it differently and see if that sticks. Okay, so now about the formulation of value proposition. So how to build these iterations that will ultimately help you to just, see what sticks to your market. So this is the example that we run with one of our customers just to help them to just, wrap up their heads around how they can figure the way to upgrade sending. And the value proposition was that you can open a franchise, provide the capital, manager runs it day to day, and overall that it's a good investment to have a franchise as a side business side, income side, thing in your investment wallet. Okay, so that's the value proposition, top level. And then what you can do with it, you can create it through or present it through different angles. So, safety net, keep your job, but build something extra. Your like friends are doing it, so FOMO based, escape 8 to 5, wherever. Basically, like we created 9 angles, which is not extremely advanced, but this is how you can frame it and present it from different perspectives. Then the A/B testing, which is important part of it. So avoid in A/B testing multiple changes. Too tiny sample is usually the problem. When the subject line is A/B tested, probably you will not see that much of a result in terms of A/B test unless you're doing it for deliverability. And if you do some of these mistakes, you may end up in a situation that instead of getting to the global maximum, which is what we all want, you're just discovering your local maximum. So you're not basically checking all options that are on the table. So how you can do it better? Pick your narrow niche. Brainstorm all value proposition and give it like 5 angles. Create a template. And now with template, what is important? You don't like A/B test everything. You just select one line, which is value proposition and angle ABC, whatever. Then you get some prospect database, launch campaigns, see winners. You can also run again the test against winners, pick the final winner and scale it up. And this is how you can find what resonates best with the audience and the value proposition that you have. And by the way, then you can get something like you have in here. So, 4K prospects and 1,241 replies, which are positive, by the way, 46% response rate, which is something that we should all aim to because sounds like a good result, I believe. Okay, so now moving, like we have the text setup, niche scoring, we have the ways to present our value proposition. So now the copy. And the copy, the main function of a copy is like to justify why it should matter for anyone. So like, why should I care when I look at this email? Some examples of messages from my inbox that, in my opinion, did not answer it perfectly, and some just food for thought, like what is, in my opinion, the waste. So when you have the subject line and opener, remember, we're all fighting for attention, and it's not only like every medium of getting customers, regardless if this is email, if this is LinkedIn, if this is like Instagram, TikTok, or doing content on YouTube. You are basically chasing for the attention. That's why we use hooks, and that's why we try to be attractive from like perspective of something is going on when you present things to people. For email and for LinkedIn, this is the content, like written content. So here, the ways that I see a lot is, for example, repeating name. So when someone says my name 2 times in the opener in the subject line, the chances that I will be actually interested are very low. And then the other one is that someone said that, hey, I don't want to waste your time, but actually they didn't have enough space to say why they don't want to waste my time. Therefore, I just ignored the message. The overall principle, or what I think makes you more successful with cold outreach, is that you don't talk about yourself. You don't say, hey, I know you're busy, because if you know I'm busy, just either don't text me or send me something that can help me with day-to-day business, because otherwise that's just noise. And of course, the email finds you well. It's separate category of content. But what is worth doing? Observation about your prospect, understanding the problem that they may have, and explaining in a clear way why you and why now. If you get the attention, you have like 8 seconds max. People will not read the whole message and will not stumble upon the content for sure. So easy language, 30 to 100 words, one offer, one angle, one CTA. We don't do like a buffet of bullet points for everyone to select what is the most, like, appealing for them, or reasonable, or interesting, because people don't have time to go through analysis of what you offer. You either know what you want to offer to them, or you don't. And then if you don't, that will mirror in your conversion rate and the empathy, or the angle for which you want to present it. So just to give you some, like, again, idea, something that works well in some of our campaigns is connecting the subject line with the opener. So as, for example, here you can see your website, and then the continuation, and the opener only had this and this visitors in June. That's a draw, blah, blah, blah. So you continue it as a constant message flow. So from the level of first view of inbox, you can actually get some attention. And remember, if like writing is a challenge for you, or is something that is overwhelming right now with all technology, including AI and on all frameworks, you can just select something and run it through like A/B test and see what framework works the best for your niche. And now the promised Excel. I'll just switch my screen for a second. So if you're not much into Excel things, just consider closing your eyes for a very short second. Okay, so I know it looks like objectively a lot of work, but it helped, at least from my perspective, to order some stuff that we do. So when you collect stuff, like, for example, you have a niche, you have, in this example, C2 Series A SaaS. You can collect what you get from conversations with customers in your research inbox, and then you can score the niche. You can create a bank of like what people say, so you know how they verbalize their problem. And the overall like goal for this is to help you to build around like different value propositions and angles, and make it easier for you to write and scale up campaigns for the future. And again, there's no way we'll go through the whole workbook that we have in here during this call, or this live session. If you feel like you're interested and that could help you, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share it with you, or just like to tell you a bit more about the framework, if that makes sense from your perspective or perspective of your business. But overall, unfortunately, investment in organizing data is something that will pay off, especially that you can automate majority of that later on with AI, so you don't have to do the whole work by yourself. But usually doing the first stage of work just to see what kind of data you can get from where manually can open up some idea on how to actually scale it up with AI later. Okay, moving forward. Very important thing that I feel people tend to underestimate, or at least not following them much, is that everyone makes buying decisions based on different factors. So You can simply A B test if your prospect group reacts to KPIs, emotions, empathy, ROI, some FOMO, competitors angle. Like a simple example, if you send cold email to me, probably I'll react to something that is around FOMO or around competitors, or, I'm pretty emotional in terms of decisions. If you try, for example, like this type of angle on my CTO, Maciej, amazing person, by the way, if you approach him with FOMO, good luck. No way he will react. And this is not because the one approach is better and one is worse. It's just because we're different as people. We work in different environments and we react to different things. For him, that will be always ROI, always conversion driven, always KPIs. And you don't have to know it. And you don't have to resonate with you. Just test it and see what brings you up the leads that you want. Okay, now very shortly about like how LinkedIn and email can be powerful together. So on the pros and cons side, LinkedIn is harder to scale. There's a bit longer process because, following connection request and then either going with DM or in mail, depending on the connection request, risk of account restriction, but you get some support from direct personal brand and better metrics like averaged out looking at the market standard. Then with email, you can scale it up easily, like horizontal scaling is there. There is some tech knowledge included, like, understanding warm up and making those choices. Copywriting challenge, of course, but it applies to both channels. Easy to scale right now, very available in terms of price. And you can reach out almost everyone in B2B sales. So basically, what you can do or what makes sense from a strategic perspective is try to take what's best from both channels. So what we take from email, we take easy to scale. So usually, in my opinion, good idea is to start with email, unless you want to do just one channel campaign or you know that your prospect group reacts better to this one. And in terms of LinkedIn, to plug it in later when you just narrow down a bit from the, I would say, highly broadcasting medium as email. And again, with email, you can reach out easily almost everyone in B2B. With LinkedIn, like, the scale of the platform is still pretty massive and not as much saturated in many areas as we may think. So if you see healthy response rate in your email, that's a question mark if you want to plug in another channel, right? Because if you see results that are good enough for you, you can do it for test and then define if you want to do just LinkedIn campaign or a mix. But if you see no replies on, for example, email as a channel, so the second scenario, that's a good trigger to start doing something differently because maybe the audience you're reaching out to is not responsive on the channel that you're using. So then you can do a simple, condition in your campaign path. You start with email, one or two, or up to your preference. And then if the response to what is above is negative, you just split the path. And in the negative path, so path no, you continue with LinkedIn actions or with any other channel, because the biggest conversion you can get is when you plug in the channel against the other channel when the first one is not converting the way it's supposed to. So here, for example, you have email, then split, and for negative path, you have visit profile connection request, direct message. Some examples just to wrap up it very quickly before the Q&A section. I want to show you directly from my inbox, just to maybe reassure or show you that those evergreen stuff that we talk about, don't talk about yourself, don't do direct sales buffet of what you want me to do for you and so on and so forth, and don't ask for a call, are still happening. And if you avoid these anti-patterns, you may actually stand out in the main inbox. So that's some examples of cold emails I get. So the first one, what we start with, there's a double first name. So at the beginning, it looks pretty automated. Well, the subject line overall looks a bit automated, and it's absolutely not necessary. The volume of content also is there, so it's not that much short. You have some generic thing at the beginning. So, I noticed what I'm doing is exciting work, and though I thought to reach out, but how it connects to the value proposition is just a random sentence that you put out there. So probably we all get the messages, especially right now on LinkedIn. I get a lot of that, maybe even more than on email, like, hey, I see what you're doing at Woodpecker. It's amazing. My agency is helping to build the web pages so we can help you to optimize use SEO traffic by 5%, blah, blah, blah. So, it's unrelated. Like, thank you for appreciating my work. sure how it connects to whatever you offer. So generic space that is wasted will not help you to drive the conversion. And then we have the pitch slap. So, we can help you with doing this, just pay. There are multiple value propositions. So just like, throw everything that is out there and see what sticks. Usually for people that don't have time, which is like what 95% of people in B2B, not the best approach, and you can lose attention very easy. And hard CTA, so 15 minutes chat, adding another call. Usually, like for example, if you target C-level, it's a risky thing, unless you want to do segmentation just by adding hard CTA and seeing how people react. And yes, there is a tiny opt-out in here. So yeah, that's another thing to add. And then another very quick example. Subject line is super obvious that this is cold outreach, and by now I probably know that this is automated. You have the I section, so I am the CEO, and yeah, then you have the very generic wording like, hey, I notice you're leading the growth and retention, and how it actually relates to what I'm doing, and when any KPIs that I'm facing. So again, very generic, very broad sentences that you can apply almost to anyone working in business, because I can easily imagine, like, notice you're leading the growth and retention, you can send to like 3/4 of C-level in SaaS companies. Then section about someone else, which takes majority of the space right here. And again, we say that, hey, we are talking about the prospect, not ourselves. And it's more about telling what they do and how they perform. So yeah, I would say evergreens that repeat all the time. Like half of my feed on LinkedIn is about like, talk about your prospect, not yourself, yet still happens. And the last example where value proposition was actually not that bad, because that was speaking on a conference or some type of speaking in front of big audience. With the volume of text, I ended up at like the first sentence because it's overwhelming. And that's a very clear example of, how even a good value proposition, you can drown it in your content or in volume of words that are very generic and not leading the person that is reading to actually understanding, what is there for me. And that's a shame, because just as an exercise, I try to transform this one, which, I mean, if you want to read it, feel free to do so, but that's a long one, to something shorter. Like, hey, you want to speak in front of 250K people, and someone just observed that I was on an event in a time frame, did something about scaling business, and then some compliment about LinkedIn profile, and then in the PS section, if I can make it, maybe asking and hear the name of a competitor next, which usually triggers people, especially of my profile. So, basically, I mean, this says the same value proposition as this one. And I'm not saying this is copywriting masterpiece, yet you always can condensate some words to make it more feasible for your audience to get what you want to show and what is your offer and how you can help. Okay, that was pretty long monologue from my end. If you want to stay in touch, this is linked to my LinkedIn profile. I'm always happy to chat about B2B sales. So if you don't want to ask questions here, you can always ping me on LinkedIn. And now let's smoothly move to the chat section. Yeah. Okay, so the question about LinkedIn, what is the main risk for LinkedIn? Is it getting turned off from LinkedIn? Yeah, so I would say that's the biggest or ultimate risk. You may get or not get some potential warnings beforehand, but overall, yeah, it's just your account being shut down. So that's the worst it can get. Of course, you can try to restore your account and build it from scratch. As I said, I've seen this happening sometimes to close friends that unfortunately get blocked and had to rebuild their account. But yeah, that's the worst it can get. And the next one is also in the same thread. If yes, what if you use Woodpecker just to automate connection requests, but not a lot of messaging? Does that reduce the risk? So overall, you can categorize LinkedIn risk into two pieces. One is that you can be reported by user. So if the same with email, right? If you send DM to someone, the person can like block you, inform LinkedIn that this is like spam, unwanted message, and so on and so forth. And this is usually like the worst. So if you're seeing or if you're sending connection requests, you're like not that much exposed to that risk. But of course, like if you're sending some notes, you can still be like reported. Yet the worst, like this is the worst what could happen. So people reporting you and blocking you constantly. The other option is that LinkedIn detects that you're automating. And here it's not that much, user driven. So it's not dependent on the reactions of user. It's dependent on your activity. So here just select a software, so the tool that is observing LinkedIn limits. So to avoid situation that uses blast connection requests in abnormal way without like any time span between sending or pinging LinkedIn, because if you do it, then you're putting yourself at risk. But overall, you're exposed to slightly different type of risks in terms of connection requests versus sending DMs or emails. Can you please suggest the tool for data scraper? I mean, it depends what type of data sets or web pages you want to scrape. I always suggest, if you don't know yet and want to test a bunch of sources, trying to go for clay and just see what is there and what type of data point would be the best for you. If you want to do slightly easier in terms of setup search, there is a software that I really appreciate and think it's a great one. So it's, for example, Disco-like. They have very good search in terms of scraping web pages and building ICP profiles and, gaining data for your lookalike search from other sources than just one. So like, for example, not just LinkedIn scraping, but a broader audience. But to be very honest, I would say is the question of testing what type of page you want to scrape and seeing how it works for you in terms of coverage of data. Because with LinkedIn and scrapers, the thing is that when you scrape the data, of course LinkedIn is not showing you physically the email addresses, and even if that would be the case, email addresses used for LinkedIn registration are very often personal ones. So the scraper is one thing, but the other thing is checking what type of data set they have plugged in, like underneath that, to give you the B2B emails, not just like Gmails, which you probably don't need for your campaigns. So I would say for scrapers, it's just testing, usually plugging it into Clay and seeing what works best. And if you want to have it a bit in easier manner, try to go for Disco-like, and they'll help you also to build the whole ICP profiling. Okay, just give me a second to catch up with the questions. Can you share a recording to this live session? Yes, it's recorded, so we'll for sure share it somehow. You mentioned double name and company name and subject looks automated. Any tips on using snippets in a realistic way? So the thing is that I would say if you have to invest in something, time or a resource, invest in targeting, because if you have good targeting, you may not need personalization. That's a personal opinion, but I mean, if a message makes sense for me or for you or for anyone, they don't care if you use their first name, or last LinkedIn post. So if you have to focus on something, I would focus on targeting to make it very, very narrow and very adjusted to your ICP or persona, and then to try to plug in personalization where it makes sense. For subject line, at that stage, I don't think you have to consider personalization unless you want to for a specific reason. But the standard for subject line, because like for what you need subject line? You need subject line to be good enough so people want to open your email, right? And in that case, what types of emails people usually open? The one that looks very casual, the one that are not like salesy or pushy or weird, just overall. So, anything that sounds very typical for day-to-day communication will be good enough. And that's why, the subject line, quick question, one of the most used subject lines in the world, is still performing in some niches. You may hate it, that's the case. I mean, quick question worked, and sometimes, at least I heard, still works, is because it sounds very, very like, very typical, very day-to-day conversation. So if you get message that looks like this company and the symbols and then this company, that's pretty obvious that it's some type of an offer. If you get something casual, like, Q3 report, or I don't know, white label template report for something, something that is very like email that you would receive from a coworker or someone related to you in business area, this is the standard that I would follow, not necessarily doing like very high level personalization on every stage. If I would have to spend the time on something, that would be definitely targeting. So just, choosing very narrow niche and making the message through the list so much that you don't need personalization anymore, because it's just so good for the audience that you're reaching out to. And then you can just do very simple personalization if you want to, but it's not a must-have at some point. Yeah, another question about slides or recording. Yes. Do people actually sell through emails these days, especially overseas? Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm not objective because I work in the niche and I survived at least like 10 deaths of cold emailing. But with all seriousness, email is still the channel that you need to utilize to run business. I cannot imagine having any business without having email address. The performance of email outreach will depend on the niche for sure. The same with LinkedIn, the same with any channel. But just to show you the scale, we have customers sending 30 million emails a month, and we have the ones that are sending like 300 cold emails a month. And in different cases, both of them get conversion that satisfies them. So that's always the question of your use case and your targeted group. I would say for B2B sales, email is the evergreen channel that will stay with us as long as we have to have it to do stuff in business. And we are still in this situation. Usually people check their email addresses like daily, couple times a day. And if you're like concerned or not sure about it, ask yourself a question. Do you check your email every day? And probably the answer will be yes. So this is also the answer to the question, can people sell through it? But what has changed a lot is that right now there's more noise because you can generate a lot of content with AI, and getting data and buying data is cheaper, and overall sending is also cheaper than what used to be. So you may see like that the overall it's more difficult because there is more noise. But yet, because there is more noise, it means that if you really get your targeting right, you're standing out, because in the whole mass of everything that is there in your spam folder and poorly targeted messages, you are the one that actually makes sense for those people. And then we come back to scoring. I mean, if you offer a solution that helps the business on the other side, people will be interested because you're helping, not forcing. So the very long-winded answer to say, yes, you can sell even overseas, but it's a matter of getting the prep work and actually understanding how you can convert it to a business. So that's, I think, the most honest answer I can bring up in that case. Okay, I think I wrapped up all questions. So guys, if you have some last minute questions, feel free to post them here. And if not, as I said, you probably still can see, you can still see the QR code to my LinkedIn profile. You can always find me there. And I'm happy to chat about B2B sales anytime you need some advice, or if you're struggling with segmentation or getting data from somewhere, or how to write a copy, feel free to send it to me. I'll try to do my best to help you organize it somehow. Because overall, it's a big part of the process. And I know, especially at the beginning, that can be overwhelming to set it up. Okay. I think we're good to go. So thanks for joining. We'll share the recording. And I hope that was valuable for you. Take care, guys.